Je was klaar volgens op. Ja. Hello, vrienden. Het is Wout. Oké. Alazi. Ze is van Europa.
Evan. Good morning. Okay, thank you.
We zijn er nog in call.
Nasir, can you hear me?
Yes, Surain.
Okay, so welcome everybody. I will start immediately by asking Nasir to do the introduction, and then we'll go over to Janet.
Once again, welcome people in this video conference, which is dedicated to the photo finish work. I will introduce Janet Nixon as Chief Judge for photo finish in several competitions around the world. Most of them are major competitions like Olympic and Paralympic Games, World Championships, as you saw in her presentation in the invitation. In the first part, we will do the introduction of the photo finish, which is usually used in most of major competitions. Then we will go to the operations of photo finish. Then at the end, we will get a session of discussion and some questions if you have after the presentation of Janet. Welcome again, and we hope that you will enjoy this presentation. I leave the floor to Janet to start her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nasser. I'm just getting myself sorted. Okay. Soren, can you just give me a nod to check you've got my screen?
Okay, it's okay.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much to Nasser for your words and Soren for coordinating and inviting me to demystify photo finish at this webinar. This is my first webinar. Please bear with me. I haven't presented in this mode before. It is new stuff for me. COVID-19 is teaching us all lots of things, and that's a good thing. I hope it will be helpful. I hope it will demystify. It is not my intention to make everybody an instant, experienced, competent, capable photo finish judge. I don't expect you to all rush out there and set up your own photo finish systems. But I hope that after this webinar, you'll understand a little bit better about the mystical photo finish room and have a better understanding of what goes on and what happens within the photo finish and how photo finish interacts with others within the sport on competition day. So the first bit is what is photo finish, this Zoom, and we'll cover the basics of when it's used and how it's used in relation to other officials and the components, and I'll cover the basic rules as they are relevant to photo finish. For most of us, we only attend a few international competitions and we do tens or hundreds or even thousands of local competitions without going to an international one. So I will be talking about how you would use photo finish at local competitions as well as at international competitions, because that's actually more relevant to most people who are involved in the sport. So first up, what is photo finish? So photo finish is here we have an image of a couple of athletes who are looking at the scoreboard. They want to know who came first. The essence of running fast and getting to the finish line was, where did you come? They're waiting for the result, and they want to know who came where. That is the most important thing. Then finally, when photo finish get their result, they send it to the results people send it to the scoreboard, and then the athletes know what happened, the whole of the stadium knows what happened, and they know what the result is. And the essence is that they're looking for the place. That's the critical part. Okay, here is another race, a different race, and I have two images here. The one on the left was taken by a friend, a regular photo of a single instant in time. And the one on the right is a photo finish image, which represents the one point in time, the finish line. The one point in space, the finish line, with a number of points in time. So the x-axis is time. You can see that in the left-hand one, you can see the athletes as they approach, but you don't actually get to find out just from that single photo who won. You can see who's likely to, but not quite who's there. And on the right-hand side, you actually see the photo finish. Now, according to the rules, the chief photo finish judge determines the placings of the athletes and as a consequence, their official times. So here in this photo finish image, you can see clearly the places where the image is all the finish line, but at different points in time. And you can see that lane 4 got there first and then lane 7. And as a consequence of doing the judging, as a consequence of seeing the different placings, that's when you can see the times. And so if we look at the time scale, we can determine their times after we've decided the places. The important bit is the place, and the secondary bit is the times, which really happens because we have the places, because we have a number of images taken of the finish line in time, and we can match each of those images to a point in time. After we've decided which athlete gets there first, we can then decide what their time was. And that happens effectively automatically. So you can see in this one, the winner, who is lane 4, she's conveniently wearing a hip number for us, she ran a time of 11:76. The vertical line that represents the cursor, the judgment, goes down to the time scale along the bottom of the screen, and that is a time of 11:76, and second place lane 7 was 11:78. Then lane 5 was third, and that was 11:86. Then lane 6, you can't see her hip number, but we know she's there because she's vertically between lanes 5 and 7, and therefore we can reasonably assume that her hip number would have said 6 had we been able to see it. And she ran 11:91, and then lane 8 ran 11:95. So you can see the placings for the first 5 athletes, but you can also see their times. Now, sometimes the times are good too. If you break a world record, that's fantastic, and it's really good to know that to know what the time is. And people like to celebrate times as well as places. Okay, so photo finish is places and times. Now, who do the photo finish judges talk to? Well, here's a picture, which some of you may have seen before, of a bunch of technical officials waiting at 3 o'clock in the morning for the jury to make a decision. And these judges often talk to each other during competition. So we've got the photo finish judges will talk to the track referee, to the start referee, to the video referee, to the competition director, to the admin and results, and to the scoreboard. You'll notice that photo finish judges do not talk to athletes, and that can be an advantage. We do not talk to athletes as a general rule. We sometimes talk to team managers, but not the athletes. Okay, so the track referee, we talk to a track referee and he or she will often give us a yellow flag, which could mean that there is a query on the race and we hold the result. So we need to talk to the track referee for that reason to know whether we can release the result. According to the rules, it's the photo finish judge's job to push the results through to the results system. The track referee decides on disqualifications. They give it to the photo finish put it in the results system. And they also tell the photo finish judge whether there's a yellow. So it doesn't have to actually be a disqualification. They might just say, hold that race, we're checking on something. And at local level competition, we also talk to the track referee to get up-to-date heat information. So somebody might have decided that we're going to run heat 3 before heat 2, or that heat 5 has been cancelled, or that there's an extra athlete in lane 4, and that kind of information is often communicated between photo finish and track referees. At the international level, at a global competition, that doesn't happen very much. But at a local competition, it definitely happens, and we need to talk to the track referee. Now, we do talk to the track referee often using a radio. That is the most convenient way. Another option is flags, and at the London Olympics, they had a very good scheme. I wasn't there, but I was told about it, and I've used this a few times since. At the London Olympics, I had a system where radios were not always a convenient form of communication, and the track referee had a table near the finish line, and the photo finish judge could look out the window and see that table. And so the track referee would actually put a green card on the table when it was all clear, and a red card when it was not clear or when it had to be held. The race had to be held, the result had to be held. So that was a very convenient way to hold up the competition or to let it go through without having to have time on the radio. That worked really well in London, and I've certainly used it since when radios don't work so well. Paper can also be used if you have a runner who's prepared to run bits of paper between the results and track referee. Paper is an alternative form of communication. The start referee, we need to talk to the start referee if there's a disqualification at the start line, if there's a yellow card at the start line, once again to get up-to-date information, and also to get technical details. We almost always have communication between the start area, not necessarily the start referee, but the start area and photo finish, in order to make sure that we have good technical connections, that there are no issues. If we're using cable systems, we need to check that it all works, and somebody in the start team is normally responsible to communicate with photo finish and make sure that technically we're all on one page. And the most convenient and the most common way to communicate with the start area is by radio. It's important that the start referee does communicate disqualifications quickly at all levels, whenever there's a commentary team, be it on-ground commentary or a TV broadcast or all of the above. If somebody is disqualified or looks like they're going to be disqualified, the commentary team will generally make it up if they don't have the information. So it's always much better to get the actual ruling from the start referee, and that's why we like to get that information really quickly. So that's an important part of the start referee communication. Video referee. Video referees tend to only happen at the very highest level at global competitions. And here's an image from Doha of the video room setup. The video referee tends to work out of a dungeon type room, and they don't see the light of day. But they do have lots of videos available to them. At a World Championships level competition, photo finish will normally get the all clear for every single race from the track referee and an all clear for every single race from the video referee. It's really critical to have radio communication to the video referee because they're often in a dungeon type place. we sometimes need backup forms of communication, and that might be by phone. Certainly in Rio for the Olympics and Paralympics in 2016, radios were challenging, and however we had some excellent local technical officials who were in constant communication by phone. They were messaging and WhatsApping and also phone calls, and that was a very important backup form of communication. Competition director. So the competition director wants to talk to Photo Finish, and they talk about event presentation and timings. Often a lot of the discussion can happen beforehand, before the whole competition starts. We have a timetable and the competition director gives some guidance as to whether the timetable is going to be adhered to strictly or what the changes might be. And often, if there are changes, the competition director then needs to communicate that information to everybody concerned, including Photo Finish. So that is normally done by radio. Here I've got an image of a competition management team, and they are sitting on some scaffolding with protection from the rain. That's not always the way competition directors work. Sometimes line of sight is a good way to communicate. If you're in a small enough stadium, the competition director may be in the same room as Photo Finish or maybe in an adjacent room. And frequently line of sight and just a nod of the head and getting eye contact can work very effectively for communication between the competition director and Photo Finish. But at a higher level competition, that's not normally workable, and we need radios. So radios are pretty important to talk to those people. Okay. Admin. Now, admin comes in very different forms at different levels of competition. At a local competition, you may have people working on laptops in their own, in an admin room that might or might not be near to Photo Finish. Photo Finish lends itself very strongly to having an electronic results system, and gone pretty much are the days of using paper forms of writing down the results. Once you have Photo Finish, the advantages of using a database type result system is, well, the advantages are quite strong, and so therefore communication with the admin is important. Admin will provide the start lists, and then Photo Finish provides the results back, and normally this would be done using electronic communication with normally a cable or networked computers or serial connected computers. There are many different forms and many different packages and many different methods, but basically there's normally an electronic form to get the results from Photo Finish to the admin and also to get the start lists. And that is certainly the case at the global competitions. You can use paper. You can write down your results and hand them to somebody. Paper is always a good backup option, but it's not the fastest way and it's not the slickest way, and it introduces potential human error. So we try not to do that. And we also have radios to the admin, unless they're sitting in the same room. At the global competitions, at Olympic Games, World Championships, we normally have a results person sitting in the room, and once the all clear has been given from the track referee and the video referee, the all clear is given to the results team, and the results team then make it official. And that might mean that they push the results through to the scoreboard, or they push it through officially. Often it goes through to the scoreboard before it's official, but then another send is used to make it official. Yeah. Scoreboard, we also talk to scoreboard. So the scoreboard here are a couple of different examples of types of scoreboards. Sometimes a scoreboard is a simple one line, which can show the running time during the race. And it can also show results. You can scroll through a result, show first place, then second place, then third place on a single line scoreboard. Or you can have a full size scoreboard which can show the results of 9 athletes at a time or more, and that might also be able to scroll. You can show transponder times and lap times as the competition is progressing, and all these things can be done using the scoreboard. It's pretty important in terms of event presentation. Many people don't realise how important that is. In photo finish, we want to give people the results. We want to give them the right results, and people expect it. I find that it's very important to be predictable, to do the same thing, produce the results consistently, and that way people will look for them. If the spectators can't reliably know that they will get the full result on the scoreboard, they will use other methods to get the results and they won't rely on it. If they know that they're going to reliably, even on a one-line scoreboard, if they know that they will get first, second and third on the one-line scoreboard, they will use that as their first point of information. And if they find that it's inconsistent, they'll abandon it, they'll use their own stopwatch, they will use their own methods, and they will not take notice of it. So it's important not to just do it, but to do it consistently and get that information to the scoreboard. Sometimes the scoreboard operator is within the same room. Some of the scoreboard operation is coming directly out of the photo finish system. Certainly things like the trackside clock and the one-line displays at the World Para-Athletics Championships last year was being operated directly from our photo finish room. The guys operating the cameras were also operating the guy operating the camera was also operating the trackside clock. At other competitions, it goes to a results system, and that then feeds the scoreboard directly. So communication to the scoreboard is important. It's really important when you have two people who are very close and there's a dead heat. If there's a dead heat, it's really important that you get both times up to the scoreboard at the same time, or else people think you've changed your mind. If you have a dead heat for third place, for instance, and you put one of them up, you have first up, and then you have second, and then you put third up, and then there's a pause, and then you put the other third place up, people think you've changed your mind. So it's really important that the scoreboard operators are aware of that event presentation aspect and that they are able to put two results up at the same time. Okay, and so yeah, scoreboard, we normally talk to scoreboard via radio, via line of sight, or alternatively via the results system personnel. So there are times at the World Championships, for instance, where, and the Olympic Games, where we don't necessarily have direct contact with the scoreboard, and that can be challenging at times. Okay, so I think that's all the people that we have to talk to. So rules as they relate to photo finish. The rules are basically in the World Athletics technical rules from Rule 14 onwards, the track rules, and in the World Para-Athletics it's from Rule 15 onwards. And photo finish, it is important to understand and appreciate all the track rules. It is not necessary to know a thing about the field event rules. But the track rules are all very important. So I'll go through the rules. First of all, starting blocks. Oops. Starting blocks. So at a local level, we have starting blocks that are not necessarily connected to any electronic system, such as the set on the left. So starting blocks are used by athletes in the sprint events and not in the distance events. When we get to a world level, and many countries have start information systems also at their own national level, they will be connected up to a start information system, and they may be blocks such as the ones on the right, where they have a speaker for each athlete, and the blocks themselves are wired through and will provide reaction times. The reaction times are important. They assist the starter in determining whether there is a false start. There are also systems that assist the starter. Seiko have a system that they have used successfully at World Championships, where they have a camera also, a camera looking from behind at the athletes, and also a camera looking from a little bit in front and to the side of the athletes, looking to see or getting a video image which is synchronized with the reaction time information, and also synchronized with the gun system, so that the starter can make a fair decision about whether there was, whether there was in fact a false start. So a false start is when an athlete starts his race prior to the gun, or less than 0.1 second after the gun. So if the gun goes and the athlete gets out in less than 0.1 of a second, then that is also considered a false start. The start information system indicates a false start. At the World Championship level, the false starts are recorded in the system, and so it's important to be aware of that and how that will work, because photo finish is ultimately the conduit to the results system, and so it's important to be sure that the results system is showing the correct result. For para athletes, they also use starting blocks for some of the classifications, and I find that when I have done para competitions that although I'm not in the start team, I am frequently being asked by the photo finish team, who are connected to their start team, which athletes need to have blocks and when do they use the start information system. And so T11, T12 and T13 for the visually impaired athletes, they all use starting blocks and a start information system, and reaction times are recorded. And T20 athletes also use the starting blocks with reaction times. There are other classifications who may choose to use the starting blocks, but we turn off the start information system because we want to have a fair assessment for all the athletes in the race, and whatever there's a choice of using them or not, we don't actually use the reaction information, so we effectively turn it off. For T11 and those T12 athletes who have a guide athlete, they both use the starting blocks, and if the guide goes and does a false start, then the athlete has a false start recorded against him. Okay, so Søren, do you want to do some questions now?
Yes, Tanya, thank you. For the first part, we have opened the questions, and we have two questions. The first one being, are the actual photo finish available to the team manager, and how?
Yeah, okay, so that's a good question, and the answer is yes. The team managers can ask, at the World Championships level, team managers can ask at the TIC to have a look at the photo finish image. It's actually often on the web within a minute, and often at a world level, the team managers can go look it up for themselves and they don't have to consult anybody. If they're not happy or they want to have a zoomed in image, they're certainly welcome to ask for it. They go to the TIC and the TIC will normally accompany them to photo finish. I strongly believe in having an open photo finish concept where people are allowed to come and have a look at the image. We do make mistakes, and it's good to have that information if somebody wants to have a look and say that they think we made a mistake. and then we can correct it. Most of the time, they go away satisfied that the result was correct. Okay?
We have a second question here.
Yeah.
The results are pushed forward by the photo finish team as official. A protest occurs. How are they treated and then?
Okay, so if an athlete or an athlete's representative wants to protest, they protest to the relevant referee. If they're protesting the actual result, as in the photo finish result, they would normally once again go to TIC and raise the issue, and if they want to take it further and appeal to the, if it's rejected, then they can appeal to the jury. We have had, there are occasions when a photo finish result is challenged, and that happens not infrequently. To my knowledge, it's only gone to the jury twice in my own experience. Obviously, other people would have different experiences, but I've only had a jury come and query officially the photo finish result on 2 occasions. Once was 2004 and the other one was last year, 2019. Okay, Surendra, I'm going to answer the next question.
Yes, to take one last question for this session. What changes to the process are made if an athlete is running under protest?
Sorry, ask the question again.
What changes are made to the process if an athlete is running under protest?
If an athlete is running under protest, from a photo finish perspective, no changes. We time them from the start to the finish. How or why they're running under protest is up to the track referee, who will have decided to allow them to run under protest. So it doesn't really impact on photo finish.
And another question here. When do you use more than one camera? Is it a priority to have more than one camera?
Yeah. Okay, so that question, the rules do indicate that you should use 2 cameras. One camera is normally adequate for many local level competitions, but it would, for us in Australia, we would always have 2 cameras on a national level competition and on many lower level competitions also. But 2 is recommended in the rules, but it's not a must, it's a should. So when is it a priority? I think if you're going to have a close wheelchair race, it's essential because wheelchairs can block each other. Other than that, it's whenever you can, basically. Okay. Suren, can I just?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm going to jump. I realise we've got 2 minutes, so I'm going to just jump to a rule that's often misunderstood, and that is wind gauge. So in the 200 metres, the wind velocity is normally measured for a period of 10 seconds, commencing when the first athlete enters the straight. When they enter the straight, that is not at the 100-metre point. Most straights are normally 80 or 90 metres long, and so we don't start the wind reading for the 200 metres till the first athlete enters the straight. That's something that's often misunderstood, and in terms of demystifying, I just wanted to get that out there. But I think I'm just about out of time now.
You still have 1 minute, so you can continue to do.
Can you hear me, Sarah? You have 1 minute, so you just go on further.
Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to jump straight to the torso. The guidelines for photo finish judges, as published by World Athletics, show these images, and they very clearly explain what the torso is. So we have a medical diagram.
Janet, yes, it's better. It's best you take that in the next session. The session will now end in a few seconds. So you reconnect. You all reconnect to the same link. As soon as it's finished, you reconnect to the same link in about 30 seconds after the end of this session. So we start the finish judging the torso in the next session. Yeah.
You're welcome. Inocencio that. Yes, Inocencio, how are you?
Maybe you will hear me quite weak.
Again, please.
You will hear me quite weak in the sound. It's not very good my microphone today.
Okay.
More or less the same that happens to student maybe.
Yeah. I seem to be having a problem with my microphone, so now I have to go.
Hello, good afternoon.
Soren always with a problem. Don't worry about it.
It's my twin brother. You see my twin brother from Benin. There's a family resemblance you see for both of us.
Yes, we see it very much. Ren, how are you?
I'm fine, and how are you?
Good.
Hey, General. General, how are you?
Demystifying photo finish. I want to see how we will demystify it today. But so Janet is doing it.
Hello, Janet. Everyone, but now I don't want to hear you. I'm muting everybody. And all yours, Janet. You've got the host?
Yeah. Okay, is that looking good?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, so I'm starting again. It's all mine?
Yes.
Excellent. So, as we left off, the finish judging the torso is essentially the body part without the head, the neck, the arms, the legs, the hands, or the feet. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of bits are cut off, but it still leaves you with the main body component. And we have tried in the guidelines to give some demonstrations as to what represents the torso. And there are just 3 examples of how we've tried to explain what the torso is. Essentially, I normally explain, if you think of the classic athletic singlet top, then that is really what the torso is. This image, which is no longer in the referee, but used to be, I find is an excellent example for people who are learning photo finish and trying to understand what the torso is. I normally show the photo and ask people which one is correct. And I will just pause for a moment, a brief moment, and the answer is that each of these is correct. That they are all representing, the cursor is representing the leading edge of the torso, the first point of the torso in the direction that the athlete is moving, and they are all correct in how they judge. Okay, wheelchairs. The wheelchair is judged by the center of the front wheel, the center of the axle of the front wheel. That rule has changed over the years, but that's what it is. It has got to be the easiest thing to do, is to judge the center of the axle of a wheel. The only time you have a problem is when there is another athlete in the way, and then you can't see it at all. And that is a big problem, and that is one of the cases where we would use 2 cameras. Race running is another sport that has come in recently and is now, well, it was a demonstration event in Dubai in 2019. Race running, we judge in the same way as we judged wheelchairs. So the center of the axle of the front wheel. And here is an example where we needed to use the infield camera to determine the second athlete there, the guy from lane 3, because we just can't see clearly the axle, although we can see the top of the wheel in order to make that judgment. Okay, one more, guide runners. So I forgot to mention earlier, track referees get to disqualify athletes. They disqualify athletes with 2 exceptions. The track referee is not qualified to disqualify athletes on the walking rule, whether an athlete has walked correctly. And if an athlete, a T11 or T12 athlete who uses a guide runner does not finish in front of the guide, then that decision is made by the photo finish judge. And here is an example where the guide finished ahead of the athlete and the athlete was disqualified. Okay, that I believe is the end. And so I will just change to my second Zoom. And I don't know why I have that line across there. It has just happened. It happened to Chris last week and it's happened to me now. Okay, sorry, maybe you can work that one out. All right, I'm going straight into my second Zoom now. So this Zoom is going to talk about how photo finish works and show you a little bit about what it does. I'm just trying to catch up with my notes. Okay, so the photo finish equipment allows us to capture the finish line so that we can quickly and accurately determine the places and consequently the finishing times. Once again, we come to the idea that we're looking at places. That's the most important bit. The times come secondary. So is a photo finish camera a video camera? Well, yes, in that it takes images at frequent intervals, just like a video camera. And the images are stored and can be viewed afterwards, just like a video camera. And they can be printed if evidence is required. But a video camera takes a 2-dimensional image and a photo finish camera takes a 1-dimensional image. A video camera may operate at about 30 frames per second. A photo finish camera would normally operate at 1,000 or 2,000 lines per second. And so they're operating in very different frequency ranges. But the video image is a useful one to use as an example because most people are familiar with a video camera. Okay, so the following few slides, first of all, I'll give credit. A lot of this PowerPoint was actually done by a colleague of mine, and he gets full credit for it. His name is Graham Kearns, and he was happy for me to use it, so I have. The next few slides were taken by a video camera of the finish line as the race was completing, and the video was operating at 30 frames per second. So hopefully this will work for me. So here we have some athletes who are about to cross the finish line, and then the next frame, they've moved a bit closer. And I'll just step through. This is what the video camera would show. If you were to use a video camera to decide what's happening at the finish line, you would be looking at something like this, and you could step through it frame by frame, just as we're doing here. And you could make your decision about what's happening. And we'll go through how that can work. Okay. However, the frame rate is just too slow. An athlete who would be running 100 meters in 10 seconds, and okay, that doesn't happen at your local meet every day, but it does happen. They will have traveled 30 centimeters between each frame of the video camera, and that's a lot. So, sorry, there we go. So let's look at what the finish line does. The finish line looks like when a video camera is used like a photo finish. We will take a slit of the image around the finish line. Now this is a fairly fat slit around, but it's better than the full frame. And that first slit, and we'll put it aside. Then we move them on to the next frame. We'll take that same slit and put it aside, and we'll put it adjacent. They were taken at 2 different time points. Then we take another one, and you can see you've got a bit of the shadow of 2 of the athletes' heads in that shot. And now we're getting a bit more shadow, and the leading athlete's knee comes through there, and so on. And we take a series of slits, put them together, and we start to have something which is a little bit more useful. Okay, so now we have all of those images put next to each other. It gives us a single image, and we can look at all of those slits at the one time. It contains a lot of information, and we can choose to use that for our decision making. It's much easier than looking at a video 1 frame at a time. However, we still don't know what happened in the 1/30th second between each slice. Surin, I've now got green on there too. I don't know how this happens. But I'll keep going. Okay, what if we did the same thing at 1600 frames per second? So 1600 frames is more like what we would use for a reasonable competition with some reasonably fast athletes. Our image goes from this to this. And that's a 1600 frame image. And there's the final result. And you know what? I'm just going to stop sharing and try again, because those are really annoying me. And see if that cleans it up. Just bear with me. Yep. Okay. So that's much better. So it's obviously my system. Okay. Now I'm back on track. All right, so there we have the final result. We have a photo. The horizontal axis is time. We can add cursors to determine the placings. And then we can determine what the times are. So once again, we can work out the placings based on an image where we took a very skinny slit of the finish line and we did it 1600 times in a second. We joined those very skinny images together, put them one next to the other, and our horizontal axis is time. We can do the judging and we can get the times. Brilliant. So the advantages of the photo finish over manual timing: it's more accurate and reliable. We're not relying on the reaction times of hand timekeepers or judges, and the results are permanently stored. We can review them later if necessary. After all, we're all human. Okay, so hopefully that has explained the essence of how the photo finish image is created. So what makes a photo finish system? All right, the layout of the photo finish equipment. The camera has a timing chip in it, and the camera gets a signal from the gun, normally cabled. Occasionally it's done via radio, but cabled is preferable. It gets a signal from the start. There's a timing chip that's running at 10,000 clicks per second in the camera normally. That records the start signal. It also timestamps each of the images. So each of those slits that we took, it puts a timestamp on them. And then when the judge decides which one of those timestamped timestamped images is the one that is of interest. The system can calculate the elapsed time between the gun signal and the image timestamp and therefore calculate times. So in order to do that with a very basic system, we have a camera, a gun, and a computer, and some means of recording, which in this diagram is a button, which can be used to make sure that we record the image. Now that's a very simple system, and it doesn't take much to start adding additional features. So an in-field camera would be another step. Additional computers in order to handle the additional camera and coordinate, perhaps separate the capturing and the reading. We need to connect to the results. As I discussed earlier, you can write them down on a piece of paper, but it's much better to connect to the results system. We can have a win gauge hooked up to photo finish. We can have a scoreboard, either a one-liner or something more complicated, hooked up to the photo finish camera and the system. We can have finish line beams, which will give us a signal to stop a running clock on the display. That's very useful in terms of event presentation. As soon as you have a running clock, it's good to have a way of stopping the running clock. And we can have a head-on camera, which allows us to look at the athletes as they're finishing in, say, an 800 metres or a 1500 metres, where they're all in lane one, and we want to try and identify the athletes. A head-on camera can be very handy. Okay, so how to set up a camera. First of all, we need to mount it somehow, and we can use a tripod or a plate. The essence, however, is that we want to be able to see with the camera all the athletes as they cross the line in all of the lanes, and so it needs to have a wide enough view to handle that. Mountings come in many different shapes and forms, and under instructions on getting lots of practical photos, I have lots of practical photos here. So the first one is taken from a camera set up in Adelaide in Australia, and the photo was from about 20 years ago when we had a very good, very stable concrete structure. You climbed up to the top of it, there was a pole there, and you would mount the camera on top of the pole. At the moment it's not mounted, and we are just putting things together. I think that day we were going to be mounting 2 cameras up there, and that's why there were 2 of us up the pole. And that is no longer approved by health and safety. It's no longer used, and I think in the later stages of its use you had to have a harness to climb up that. Oh well, it was fun while it lasted. And now they have a camera which is in a room hanging off the roof, which also needs special permission. But that was one of the beauties, a very good camera pole. This one is a very skinny tripod. The tripod has a very narrow base. It is reinforced, but it is a particularly narrow base. I think this camera looks to me like it is lined up as an infield camera at the 200 metre point. You can see there's a discus cage in the background, so we didn't have a lot of room to play with. A wider base is normally more stable, and stability for cameras is really critical. We want them to be more stable than a TV camera. So when TV say, yes, we've set up scaffolding for you, it'll be just fine. You say, no, I want something to another level structurally of stability in order to work a photo finish camera. Here's one that is just a pole. So at the base, it will have gone into a concrete block of some form, and it's just a pole. So there's no tripod at all. It's a camera. The camera has a blue cover on it, and it's sitting on the top of a white pole. And that white pole also provides an extension of the white finish line track when looking from the outfield. This one has a bit of a story. So this was from the Gold Coast in 2018, the Commonwealth Games. We had a test event and set up normally have 2 cameras on the outfield and 1 on the infield. Set up our 2 cameras on the outfield, and for the whole of the test event, the wind blew really strongly, particularly at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There was just every single day, there were really strong winds, and that was impacting the ability of the camera to stay still and still enough to take, to stay on the line. So in between the test event, for a major event, we always have a test event. In between the test event and the main competition for the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games, the Gold Coast competition team put together this structure, which was like a box. It took the wind and sheltered the camera, and we could access the camera from behind. There's a flap there so that we could access it. And it therefore buffeted the wind, and the camera was perfectly stable for the whole of the competition. Similar problems were experienced in London at the Olympics in 2012, and their resolution, well, that was at the Olympics themselves. It was very windy. They had a solution for the Olympics, but after the Olympics, they moved their location for the photo finish camera at that stadium because they found it was just too windy where they wanted to mount it. So they had a lovely mount, but it was just too windy. And here is one. It's a little unusual in that we have 2 cameras on the infield. This was the Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires 2018. The track, it was a Youth Olympic Games, so it was a world-class global competition, but the track was, a lot of the stands were scaffolding, and it was not quite of the same standard as one might have for the Olympic Games. The outfield position, there was no position within the stand. The stands were not stable enough. So the outfield position was going to be on the grass, and it was felt that there would be too much movement of athletes and officials in that area. So we put the 2 principal cameras on the infield, and there we have 2 cameras on the infield. They were the principal and the backup. There was also an outfield camera which was used for the alternate view. And these are 2 cameras that are, this was from Doha 2019 World Championships. The Seiko cameras were set up, this was within the media range, the media area. So there were TV cameras all around us, and there were people all around. But Seiko have their own little stand, and it was very stable. It was very good up there. It was just very difficult to get to, and you needed media accreditation to get there. So mounting cameras, when you're climbing a pole, it's easier to use a ladder, as in this diagram. On the left, we have a camera which is mounted at the 1,500 metre point of a mile race. I can't count how many times people have wanted to run a mile, and they also want to get 1,500 metre times. So we set up a special finish line, 109 metres from the finish line. We set up a camera. We do all of that, and not once have I ever known somebody to qualify in a 1,500 based on the 1,500 metre time in a mile, but we do it again and again because the athletes ask so nicely, and we are so happy to do it. So there you go. Okay, preparing the finish line. First of all, we use a, sorry, Suren, I don't have my chat open. Do we have questions so far?
No, yeah.
No, okay, fine.
You can continue, Janet, no problem.
Okay, so I'll just keep going. So we use a 50 millimetre wide gaffer tape. In this diagram, the athletes are running up the screen, and we're only showing lanes 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we have a red track. We have white lane markers already in place, and then we put down a white gaffer tape on the finish line to make it nice and clean. We use black gaffer tape, which is 20 millimetres wide. So the finish line, for those who've studied their rule books, is 50 millimetres wide. That's why 50 millimetre wide gaffer tape is perfect for the finish line. But the black tape that we put down is only 20 millimetres wide. So we put down black gaffer tape on the intersection of the lane line and the finish line. And that's used to help us identify the lanes when we're reading the photo finish image. That's the reason. It's to make life easier for the photo finish judges. And to take it to another level to make it even easier, we actually put 2 marks down at the intersection of 4 and 5. And then when we look at the image on a photo finish picture, we can tell clearly which is lane 4 and 5. You can see in this image that I showed earlier, there's a double line between lanes 4 and 5. So we have the athlete in red is in lane 2, his feet are on the ground, that's clear. So that's 2, 3, 4. Then we have a double line between lanes 4 and 5. Then we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 you can see, and the outside athlete is in lane 10, taken from an outfield view. Even better when we're doing our finish line, because if we put a black mark down on the track in order to help us, it's sometimes glossy. Glossy marks reflect, and that makes it difficult to see. So we do an inverted T. And here's a little graphic. And we create that little T with our gaffer tape, with our hands, put it on the finish line, and then we have a really nice, clean finish line that looks white with black marks where the lane markers are. The next thing we do to prepare before we can start our competition is we extend the finish line by putting something white on the opposite side to the camera, giving a better image. Trying to put gaffer tape on a wet track is almost impossible. So when we go to a World Championships, Olympic Games, that kind of level competition, the photo finish team, either the contractors or the judges, are normally there some days in advance. And the finish line is normally gaffer taped down in the days prior to it in order to avoid the rain and in order to get things done in time. But it's very important not to do it when it's raining. Yes, you can use a staple gun. It does work. I've done it. And grass tracks are really difficult. You can mask, you can spray. Yeah, grass tracks are very difficult. So try to avoid them. But you can put a finish line down, and there are lots of cute ways that people have managed to achieve that, but they are difficult. Okay, camera alignment. I just want to run through these steps so that you all have some idea of the camera alignment. I will do it quickly, so don't be worried if you don't quite catch it all. First step is level the camera, okay? Next step is set the tilt and the zoom so you capture all of the athletes in all of the lanes. Sounds obvious, but it's pretty simple. Get the tilt and the zoom right, and then you check the level again. Okay, then you think you've got you're doing nicely, you move on. The next step is challenging. You align the camera a little bit in front of the finish line. Then, so you've got the right tilt and zoom, then you rotate it towards the finish line. If, as you rotate it, the lanes that are closest to you, if they appear first, then your camera is beyond the leading edge of the finish line. We want the camera to be right on the leading edge of the finish line. If the inner lanes, the closer ones show first, then you're beyond it. And if the further ones show first, then you're in front of the leading edge. So by rotating the camera as you come onto the finish line, you can tell whether the camera is in front of or behind the line. You then slide the camera in the appropriate direction to correct that alignment. Then you check the level again, and then you do the same thing. You point it a little bit in front, you rotate it through to the finish line, and you look to see which bits come on first. If you get everything coming on together, so lane 1 through to lane 10, all coming on together, that means you're right on the leading edge, and that's where we want it to be. Okay. Here are 2 examples. The green dots show where the camera is aligned. The one on the left, you can see that the camera is looking along the finish line, but it's actually angled across. So it could be that it's not level, or it could be that it's just completely off. And the one on the right shows a very straight line going straight down the finish line, and and continuing in that vertical plane of the leading edge of the finish line. There are many ways to correct these things, but essentially going through those steps I described, check the level, rotate, slide appropriately, repeat. You do that ad nauseum until you get it right and you're happy with the alignment. Then, as described in the guidelines for photo finish, you do a run through. Now, here's an example, and I've got the images from both the infield and the outfield camera of two people who were running. It's really important that the essence of what I wanted to get across here is that you have somebody, in this instance, lanes 2 and 8. And the radio is very useful because it gives a single point or a clear point. And we want a point that's high and low at the two extremes of the lanes. That way we get 4 points that represent a vertical plane, and we can compare them between the infield camera and the outfield camera, and that will show us if our two cameras are aligned to each other. Now, in this case, they weren't quite. We had some more work to do, which we did do. But once you line up your camera and you think it's good, you want to know if the infield camera is also looking at the same plane. And you want those two cameras to be looking very close together to the same plane. And so that's why we get the 4 points. In this example, the 4 points are basically the two radio points to get the high point, and on each of the runners we've got a back foot. We've got a foot, the back of a shoe, which is a very clear point that can be represented on both cameras. Okay, the zero test. I'm going to do a quick version here. So the zero test, a lot of people like to look. And here's a photo of a lot of people looking. Here's a photo where we actually see what's happening on the finish line there. We've got a gun on a dark surface. The reason we do that is that we want to have a light showing against a dark background, and that gives us the ability to see the time when the gun goes and plot it on the photo finish camera and compare it to when the camera thought time was 0. Here's an example of a zero test from the photo finish perspective, where we put a cursor on the very first point. That's an electronic gun image. We put a cursor on the very first point, and that tells us what the zero reading is. We read it to 10,000ths of a second. And in this case, it minus 0.3 of a millisecond. The zero test should be less than 1 millisecond. Now, this is an explanation. I will briefly go through it. The starter pushes the start button. At that time, we have sound and we have light, and we have a signal going to the camera. We have the camera's ticking away on its clock at 10,000 times a second, and the images are being taken at least 1,000 times per second. There are some delays involved in each of the light and the internal clock. And the question we're trying to ask is the time between the light being emitted and the internal clock starting, is that time less than 1 millisecond, or is it not? And if the light happens first, then you'll get a negative result. And if the light happens afterwards, you get a positive result. The rule says that it must be less than 1 millisecond, and it doesn't matter if it's minus or positive or negative or positive. It just needs to be less than 1 millisecond. And if anybody wants more details on the zero test there, they can contact me via Surin. Okay, so a couple of tips and hints. I've just got a few minutes left. One is to capture all athletes, and I've got an image here with one athlete who was lapped. So we've got 3 athletes who finished their race. One athlete who was lapped, he was still going round. We don't judge him, We don't put a cursor on him, but we do record him. It's very important to record everybody from when the leader finishes. And the reason for that is somebody may have made a mistake. If we record everybody, then we know that we will capture all the true finishes. If somebody was sent round an extra time, then we will still get an image of them. And so we can then go back and look at our notes and record them. Okay, so the other tips were the hip numbers. Use hip numbers. They are the most effective way to identify athletes who are not in lanes. And use a front camera if you possibly can to help identify athletes when they're all finishing in lane 1. So that is all I have for this one. Suren, do we have questions?
Yeah, I'll go through the questions.
Sure.
So we have, according to the rule, it's 1,000 photos per second. Is that for the major competitions like the Olympics or the World Champs, is that enough, or do we have something which is more with more frames?
I could go on about that for about an hour, but I'll choose not to. The rule says 1,000. There are many photo finish systems where 1,000 is the limit, and so the rule is accommodating real life. At the World Championships, I would never have them run at less than 2,000. And the reason for that is because you want to know if it's less than 1,000, you need to be sampling at least twice that in order to be sure. And so, yeah, the rule is 1,000, but if at all possible, you run it at least 2,000. And I think in the guidelines it says that 2,000 is preferred. So if you have a choice, run it at 2,000.
Okay, we have a question from Loreto. It's what would you consider an agreement as an agreement to 1,000th of a second between the cameras, the principal and the second camera? Does both of them need to be that? Does it mean that both of them are in the same 1,000th of a second, or there is a difference between them?
Okay, so Loretto, I think you're asking here when we have two cameras, so the principal and the second camera, they're on either side, and we want to be able to use the second camera for making a judgment when the first camera has maybe an obscured athlete or something like that. So essentially, I think in the guidelines it does say it should be 0.001 seconds between them. The reality is, what I use it for is I want to know what it is. I want to know how far apart they are. I want to know if they're parallel or if there's a slight angle. If I know that they're perfectly together in lane 1, but they're not in lane 8, then I can happily use them in lane 1, but in lane 8, I will allow for that difference. In the run-throughs, we do make that assessment. We also make the assessment during competition. We compare our outfield and infield images, and we have an ongoing assessment of it. It's a case really of knowing, what does it mean? Can I really use the infield? I've only once ever seen two cameras aligned up to a 10,000th of a second, and that was pretty impressive. But stadiums move, so even throughout a competition, there's potential that the cameras may have slightly adjusted. You know, the one on the infield is in the sun, the one on the outfield is at the top of the grandstand, and they may well move during competition or as the sun comes out. So the run-through is a guide, and we continue to do that and assess them during the day. And it's really a case of knowing what the principle is.
It's going to stop. So same principle, we reconnect immediately on the same link for the start of the third session, and we can continue as soon as we reconnect.
Okay. Have you got the other questions?
Okay, Janet, you're the host.
Yep, I have control.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the final section, I'm going to talk about international competitions and what really happens at that level. it's very exciting. Okay, so first of all, the teams. Normally in a local competition, you may have a team of 1 or 2 or 5. At an international competition, we have different sorts of teams, and I have a few sample team shots. So on the left is the Commonwealth Games in the Gold Coast. That was a team that includes photo finish. It included transponders as well, but none of the results team. And also on the right, that's just the team that consists of photo finish, capturing graphics to the trackside scoreboards and also to TV. So that's that team is 10 people or so. Some teams are bigger. The Commonwealth Games in 2014 had an enormous team. There were no less than 5 judges and an enormous team of contractors. That did include results as well, though. So some photo finish rooms, they vary from place to place, and I don't have photos of all the rooms that I've worked in. I wish I had been more diligent in taking such photos, but I got some examples anyway. The left-hand side here is the results team from the World Para Championships last year in Dubai, and the right-hand side is the photo finish team. You can see there the 2 national technical officials wearing white, and the contractors are sitting down. Obviously, I took these photos when we weren't actually doing competition. But you can see the basic layout. Video distance measurement in the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, they also shared our room. So it was an enormous room, and we had plenty of space for everybody. Video distance measuring were just at the back of our room. This is the room for the Youth Olympic Games that had results in the back and photo finish at the front. And you can see it when it was empty and also when it was full, or when it had most of the people in there operating. So the camera operators tend to get the front row seats and the transponder operators, and results really don't need to see the track at all, so they don't. They get the back. This is a photo finish room from Nanjing. Now, in China, they seem to have enormous amounts of space, and they were results people in there, as well as photo finish, as well as a bunch of volunteers, and I really have no idea what they were doing. And then this one is an interesting one. This was Rio 2016, so Olympic Games. We had about 15 people in a very small space. When the test event was on, everybody went home sick. And when the Olympics came around and the Paralympics came around, it was very hot. We had an air conditioner, but we didn't want to get sick again. So we had a very clear protocol that when there was no competition, the air conditioning was on and it made the room a good temperature. And when everybody came into the room and we had competition, we turned the air conditioner off. And that meant that we weren't breathing in each other's air quite as badly as we might have. And we all went home healthy. So that's what worked in Rio in terms of having a lot of people in a very small amount of space. The next Olympics will be socially distanced. And I think it will look like a very different room because that just would not work. Yeah, Rio was an extremely crowded room. You can see that you'd have, 5 people within a 2 square metre. It just doesn't work in terms of avoiding getting sick. This is still in Rio. At the Olympics and at World Championships, one of the challenges is that between, and this is, partly the contract team, but also the judging team, who are effectively working as one big happy family when competition comes, even though we're wearing different uniforms. Between the morning session finishing and the afternoon session, well, not the afternoon session beginning, but by the time you need to be there in order to prepare for the afternoon session, you might have 3 to 4 hours. During those 3 to 4 hours, you need to eat lunch. And if your accommodation is an hour away, you're going to use most of it traveling. You tend to get back to your room at night after midnight, and you're back on a bus at maybe 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning. So that doesn't really leave enough time for sleeping and eating. And certainly in Rio, it was a situation where most people found a place to solve that problem. So it is glamorous at the top level, and it's also just basic needs. You need to eat, you need to sleep, and you need to work. And some people managed to sleep. That guy had no idea I took the photo. He was fast asleep across 4 chairs. It was more comfortable than just out the front, which was lying on concrete, but that also worked. So very crowded and very tiring. This is the results room for Rio. So the results guys, once again, down in a dungeon, they don't need to see the track, and so they don't. The views of the track are very precious, and only the people who need to see the track get to see the track. Okay, so that's a run around of a few different venues and a little bit about what it looks like in terms of a major championship. I now want to go through a story of the World Championships in Beijing. There was a race that was particularly good in terms of explaining how photo finish works and what we do. So I'm going to go into it a little bit in depth. First of all, I thought I'd show you the team for Beijing. The people in white shirts are the judges. So I was the international photo finish judge. We've got on the right 2 Chinese. Shan, who's taking the photos, she was very keen on photos. And I met her in England a couple of years earlier. And she was, so she spoke very good English. I speak nothing but English. The other Chinese official just behind her was the chief. She spoke limited English. And the one over on the left was actually from Taiwan, and he was there as a visitor. And so he did not make any judgments. He listened and he observed, and he was just there, able to learn. They had a major competition coming up. I can't recall what it was. I don't know. Anyway, Shan was the reader, and her chief was the communicator with the track referee. At that time, the track referee was not an ITO, and so the track referee spoke Chinese. So therefore, the Chinese chief judge communicated the information from the track referee, and I don't think we had a video referee at that time. And so I got the clearance from her, and if I wanted to challenge what the track referee had said, I did that through Shan and the chief Chinese judge. All the people in black with nice happy faces are the Seiko team. They come and work very hard and get all the equipment in place and operate the equipment. So as a judge, I don't actually touch the keyboards or the mouse or any of the equipment. I'm allowed to look but don't touch. And the 2 guys in red are from Delta Tray, the results system. So they, I found out later, had never done an athletics meet before. There was a bit of a learning curve for them. I wish I'd known that at the start, because I might have not made so many assumptions. I had assumed that they were experienced. They were, as it turned out, very good, but knowing a little bit about that would have been helpful. And I've worked with them since, and they're brilliant. I love those 2 guys, and happy to work with them again. It's just, it's really important when establishing what is going to happen and what do we do when something goes wrong. It's good to know what other people's experience is. So it is handy to work with people you've worked with before. And most of that team I have worked with more than once now. Okay, and now I have blue on my screen. Okay, it's gone, good. All right, so the really interesting event at this competition was the men's 100 metres. There were 3 semi-finals. Okay, so in our 3 semi-finals, so there were heats and so on. We got to the semi-finals. There were 3 semi-finals. When you have 3 semi-finals, the progression to the final is the first two go through on places, and then the next two go through on times. And in this instance, that was the plan. And we had 8 athletes. They were in lanes 2 to 9. So we had 9 lanes, and lane 1 was left empty. And the first semi-final was held. The first and second, Bolt and Degrassi, ran 9.96, and third place, they both ran 9.99. Now, at this point, having had nobody else run, they were going to be the first 2 timed people to go through. Just because of those 2 black marks, I'm just going to cut this and open it again. No, they're still there. Okay. Oh, well, I don't know why they're there. Okay. Semi-final 2 came along. In semi-final 2, the first 2 places were faster, 9.77 and 9.86. Third place was 10.00. And so, being diligent people, we knew that the first 2 times from the first semi-final were still the fastest times to go through to the final. So they were sitting there waiting, and they wanted to know what was going to happen in the third heat. The guy who ran 10.00 was already out. He was not going to make it to the final, but everybody got their place and their time. Then we had the third semi-final. In the third semi-final, we had a 9.96. Okay, we'd already had a 9.96. We had a 9.97, and then third place was 9.99. Now, because we'd been paying attention, we knew that there were the first 2 places go through and the next 2 times. So we now have 3 athletes on 9.99 vying for 2 spots in the final. Okay, so the way we determine the rankings is the first place are ranked, and then the second places are ranked, and then the times are ranked. And so although in heat 2, Mike Rogers ran a 9.86, he was only going to get the 4th ranking when we go to consider what happens in the next round. And in fact, we also had 2 first places who both ran 9.96. That's fine. They were assessed, and Gay, it doesn't actually matter, but Gay did have a slightly faster time within that 100th of a second. And it wasn't going to make a difference because they would be randomly put in the draw for the middle lanes. Then we looked at the next 3 athletes. So we had 3 athletes on 9.99, and the rule, I think I have it. The rule says, yes, if there's a tie, now the rules have changed slightly since 2015, but the essence is the same. If there's a tie for the last qualifying position based on time, the chief photo finish judge shall consider the actual times recorded by the athletes to 1/1000th of a second. So we only normally judge to 100th of a second, but we had to consider the times to 1/1000th of a second. Now, even before we looked at the times to 1/1000th of a second, Brummel has to get it ahead of Sue because he beat him. We know that he beat him clearly on the photo, and so it's just a case of working out where the French guy fitted relative to the other 2. So we go back to our race. Now, these images aren't as crisp as they might be, but they're reasonably good. The green vertical line represents the judgment, and the timing along the bottom tells you the times. I don't have a record. I didn't look hard enough to find the actual times that they recorded. But if you have a look at semi-final 1, you can, the 2 front places we're not interested. We're looking at the 3rd and 4th place. And those times are not 9.99. Yes, they are. Those times are about 9, 98, 2 and 8-ish. So they go up to 999. And then if you look at semi-final 3, he also looks to be about the same time as 4th place from semi-final 1. And when we looked at them and we considered whether we had judged them correctly, we found that although Brommel was definitely ahead, the other two had the same time to 1,000th of a second. And so the next step of the rule says, if you have 9 lanes, you push them through. And so that's exactly what happened. We had a start list for the final, which had our winners and second place. So Rogers, Bolt, Gay and Gatlin. These were the 3 first places, and Rogers had come second. He was the fastest of the second places. So they were in a random draw for these lanes. Then the other 2 athletes who came second were randomly allocated lanes 8 and 9. And then the 3 athletes who had come in for the 2 timed positions were given lanes 1 to 3. Okay, so that was actually all within the rules. And a lot of people asked me a lot of questions about that and how did we decide it, and, you know, suggested all sorts of methods, but we just followed the rules. The rules are there to be followed, and they work perfectly. We were lucky that we did have a 9-lane track. Had we only had an 8-lane track, there would have been a coin toss for the last athlete to go in the final. Now, this image shows the photo finish room as it was when we read the men's 100-metre final. And I think it's a really good image because most people never get to see what it's like in a photo finish room when we're actually working. People come into the photo finish room when we're not working, and it looks like we don't do anything. And when we are working, so what we have here, I'll just explain it. We've got the 3 men sitting at computers were all operating cameras. There were 3 cameras, a principal on the outfield, an infield, and the backup on the outfield. Shun and I were on either side of the operator for the principal camera. Behind us, we had the Chinese chief, and you can even see she's got a radio in her hand. She was in communication with the track referee to get the all clear. Standing behind is another one of the contractors, and then at the very back, we've got 2 of the competition management from the IAAF who were in the room, are not normally in the room, but they were in the room on that occasion. I can't explain why. I felt a presence. I knew that somebody else was there. I didn't turn around because it was not my concern. They did not, they never attempt to influence. They just wanted to know. And indeed, when we do have close races, if we can give the times to 1,000th of a second to the media, we do that. And one of the guys there, one of his roles is that he will take the times to 1,000th of a second and make it public if there's a close one. It tends to help avoid protests and appeals. It helps to keep people happy. It gives the commentary teams, the TV and all sorts of, and the media something to talk about. And at the most recent competitions, that is actually standard going through the system, is that they automatically get the times to 1,000th of a second and nobody has to come in and ask us a question at all. Anyway, so there we were reading. Another thing that I was asked before that session, so this is the men's 100 metres. It was the evening session of the second day. Shun had been doing the reading, and when I'm at an international competition, I prefer to have the national judge do the reading, and I look over the other shoulder of the operator, and that way I can jump in. I find it's a very effective way at international competitions to make sure that we have a backup. I don't normally do the first read. I am the backup read, I'm watching, and I will jump in. And the operator knows that if I say something, then he takes that, like if there's any question, then my word is the final word, but I tend not to say anything unless I think there's an issue, and that way we've got a backup. I think that's really important. Otherwise you have no backup. Everybody's human. We all make mistakes. You're doing a competition for 9 days. You're going to make the occasional error. And if you have 2 people watching, then you've got to back up. So that's really important. Anyway, enough of that photo. Men's 100 metres. In the final, the controversy didn't finish. So after following the rules and getting 9 people into the final, we then had first and second were clear. The judgment was easy. Bolt 1, Gatlin second, not a problem. Third place was a tie. You can see that it's a tie there, and I'll just explain a little bit about how I make that decision. What we do is we look at the, so the athletes are in lanes 3 and 9. We will have looked at the athlete in lane 3, placed the cursor on him. We can clearly see his torso, there's no real question, and then, and zoom in on it. And then we move the zoom down without moving the cursor and have a look at lane 9. We can take the cursor off the athlete and back on the athlete, and if we decide that that's the same pixel, so the same one of those little images that we took on the photo finish camera, if the same pixel is where his torso has reached the finish line, then that is a dead heat. And so in this instance, that was the case. There was no athlete obscuring another athlete. They weren't really, you know, the torso was very clear on both athletes. And so it was something we looked at because you don't give equal third place readily. But in this instance, it was. Unfortunately, although I gave my best instructions and I tried to get it to the scoreboard so that both of the athletes went up on the scoreboard at the same time. And in the room, you can hear the cheers. Like, we know when an athlete's time goes up on the scoreboard, particularly if they're a local athlete, we can hear the cheers, we know when it's gone up. It's normally a few seconds after we've judged it and we've probably moved on to the next athlete. And with these two, it would appear, I did not have a good view of the scoreboard and so I couldn't tell, but I was told by many people that, and I think it was the Canadian who went up first, and then the other one went up sometime later. And the reports varied up to a minute. I'm sure it wasn't that long, but it may have been a number of seconds later that the other third place went up, which then caused issues in its own right because people were challenging the result, thinking that we had changed our mind. Indeed, we hadn't. We made a decision. We pushed them both to the result system, but unfortunately, probably due to lack of understanding, they went up differently. So there you go. The Beijing men's 100 metres was exciting, was interesting, and it caused lots of questions. But in fact, all that we actually did was we just followed the rules, followed our guidelines. After we decided the third places, which were equal, and they both get a medal, you'll then notice that the places 6th, 7th and 8th all ran 10-0-0. So in fact, we then had another close decision on lanes 6 and 8, but I think that was actually, it was also quite clear. We just need to make sure that we got it right and that we read them in the correct order. It's important to read in order when your results are going directly to the scoreboard. Okay, so I just threw in a few images that might demonstrate a little bit about photo finish. This one is the men's 110 metres hurdles, also in Beijing about a few years earlier in 2008. And what I wanted to show here is that the athletes in lanes 7 and 8, the two lower athletes on the image, their cursor is actually on the back. So the first point, and this does happen more in 110 hurdles than in any other event, that the torso is the torso from the front and the back, and male high hurdlers have a habit of, they're so bent over that we actually read their back as the first point of the torso. So it happens, and there's an example. This one is just an example of a men's 100 metres. It was at the Olympics, it was semi-final 1, looks like Bolt again. The men's 100 metres, unless it's really close, as it had been in 2015, they're actually some of the easiest races to read. there's a perception that, you know, the men's 100 is difficult. In fact, so long as they're nicely spread out, and these guys were, it's easy because you can see all the athletes in one screenshot. You know who they are, you know where they slot in. You just go bang, 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 read, read, read. The results go up on the scoreboard. And at the top level, all the athletes are wearing lycra. It's very easy to tell where their torso starts and finishes. And it makes life a lot pretty straightforward. The next one is a women's hurdles, and this one was really the girl in lane 3. I just wanted to show we almost certainly used the infield camera to make that decision. But you can see that the torso is twisted. There's the judgment on where to put the torso, where to put the cursor for the torso is not at the point of the shoulder, and in this case the point is not even pointy, but it's about 1/3 of the way from the point of the shoulder to the base of the neck, and that's what represents the torso on the shoulder line if you can't see any other component of the torso. In this one I suspect that we could probably see a better view of her torso on the other view. Okay, jury, and I don't have a lot to say about the jury, but I thought I'd throw 2 photos in there. And the one on the left is from Rio Paralympics. So there was a photo of 4 of us. Those 4 of us were in constant radio contact for 10 days of competition. We have the track referee, photo finish, secretary to the jury, and the video referee. So every single track event, we had communication, and we had frequent communication from the secretary of the jury. If anybody wanted to protest, be it protest a result, be it the actual result at the finish, or whether there was a jostling situation or an athlete was being pulled, whatever the case, it would normally involve the track referee making a decision, the video referee looking at video reference, and if it was the final judgment, it would involve me, and I would provide times to 1,000s to help convince the athletes or the athletes managers that their times were in fact well separated. And the results all, if there was a change in the result, if somebody was disqualified or reinstated, that all went through me because I was the main contact for the results. So we spent a lot of time together. I can't think of any jury scenarios which went to photo finish, but I was heavily involved with the jury because they kept coming and asking me lots of questions. And because of my notes on what happened, I think the chairman of the jury used to pop into my room regularly and look through my notes to see who'd been disqualified in particular events. The one on the right is from Doha, where we were there at 3 o'clock in the morning waiting for a jury decision. And once again, we got to know each other very well, waiting around after competition. One more thing before I finish and go to questions is I should mention we at international competitions, it applies to all levels, but it's really has an impact at the international level. After the last track event is finished, we wait 30 minutes in case there is a protest. And the reason for that is that if somebody wants to come and have a look at the photo finish image, we want to have all the equipment up and running so that they can come in, have a look, make a decision about whether they're going to appeal or not, and that's the team managers. And so therefore we like to have the equipment ready to go. And so not everybody in the photo finish room has to hang around for 30 minutes, but certain critical personnel do need to hang around for 30 minutes after the last event until we're all free to go home. Okay, thank you very much. Surin, did we have questions?
Yes, Janet, thank you, first of all, for a very bright presentation, a brilliant presentation. I think it's been an eye-opener for all of us. And I'll shoot the questions as I go along. So the photo finish, can the photo finish be used for lap times? And have they been actually been done for that at international level?
Okay. Well, the first question is, can it be used for lap times? And the answer is yes. In Sydney, we have a regular competition, a regular feature of our competitions. We record everybody as they cross the finish line and we generate a report. Yes, that happens. At an international level, we don't normally use photo finish for lap times. What we do use is transponders. So transponders are in the bibs of the athletes who are running 800 metres and above. And there is normally an antenna underneath the track at all four corners, so the 100, 1500, 200 and the finish line. And therefore the lap times can be generated from the transponder times. Because they're transponder times, they would normally only be given to a 1/10 of a second.
Okay, so how many people make up the photo finish team for international, regional, and national competitions? Does this number vary?
Okay, yes, the numbers vary. Strictly for an international is easy. You have an international judge and normally one national judge. You can have two. In Glasgow in 2014, we had 4. You really only need 1, maybe 2. It kind of depends on the environment and the reason for why you might want more than 1 person. You can only really have 2 people looking at a screen at a time, so having more than that is a little bit challenging. At a local competition, you need to make sure that you've got enough people to, well, depending if you have timing contractors or if you do it all yourself. In Australia, we do it all ourselves, and for a national level competition, we would normally have about 5 people and run 2 cameras, and if we have to run an extra couple of cameras, we need an extra couple of people. So it does vary, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve and how many extra things you're doing, like if you're doing lap times.
Okay. Do you have several service providers for photo finish equipment, or do you have a restricted number of providers which is approved by World Athletics?
No, there's no approved list or anything. So World Athletics has a contract with Seiko, and Seiko provide timing services for World Athletics competitions. Olympic Games, they have a contract with Omega. At regional level, it's whatever the organisation has a contract with. And yeah, so there's no set group of contractors. The reason we have an international photo finish judge and chief is to make sure that the contractors and the team are doing things correctly and complying with the rules. So that's basically the reason that I go to the world level competitions, is to make sure that it's all being done correctly. So because of that, we can therefore approve anybody who is there, so long as it's being supervised by somebody who's been recognised. I think that answers the question.
Yeah. And one last question is, how much time do you need to adequately set up the photo finish equipment before you meet?
Well, that depends on how accurately you want it lined up. If the camera is a permanent fixture at the venue, there are many venues where there are cameras that don't ever move, and all that it takes is a power things up, do a slight adjustment, bang, you're ready. So it could be less than an hour. Other competitions where you have to set up from scratch, it could be that you want to be there 3 days. For the global competitions, a photo finish team of contractors normally get there somewhere between, I think, 5 days to 2 weeks ahead. It varies greatly, and yeah, so for a major competition where you're bringing in everything, you need a lot of time to set up.
Okay, thank you, Janet. That was the last question. Before I need to see if Okri, are you open? Are you unmute? I don't think so. Janet, can you unmute everybody? Go on participants and click unmute.
How about I just give it back to you?
Okay.
Have you got it?
Am I the host? You are giving me the host?
Yes, you're in charge.
Let me see. Non-Vignon. Okri, where are you?
I can't see him.
Okri, are you here?
He's waving.
Okay, let me see if I can unmute you.
Yes, Suren, thank you. Thank you, Janet. I can say now, from my side, the photo finish is definitely demystified, and I hope that this is the case for everyone. The presentation by Janet comes to light our lantern. This is why I would like, on behalf of you, all of you, to thank Janet for the quality of her presentation and for her availability. Janet remains a great reference for us, and anyone who would like to know more about photo finish can contact us. We will be happy to act as an intermediary to Janet. When I say we, information not here but by email. Here, let me share again the email address by which you will send information to us so that we can send a certificate to you. Just a moment. Okay, here you are. Here is our email address. Please do send information to us. Then we will send the certificate to you. You can also use this email address to send a question to Janet. We will send that question to her and we get answer back to you. So for French-speaking pupils, we are planning a session, French session to you, session which will be managed by Didier Foulon from Belgium. It will be Suren when? Next Saturday?
We are going to finalize with Didier tomorrow, but next, on the 11th of July, in 2 weeks' time, we will be having a session with Helen Roberts. She will be talking about video referee and innovative technologies. And so we invite everybody, we will invite everybody to send in your email, and we will invite everybody to join us in 2 weeks' time with Helen Roberts. Then also we will have a session with Yukio Seki.
Yukio Seki
we'll send you the date afterwards. He will be talking about the technical manager, the role of the technical manager, the facility, equipment, etc. So here again, you will be sending you with the invites. We'll also have Thomas Nuss from Team Thomas.
Team Thomas,
yes. We'll be talking about the TIC and the competitive software. So we have several in line. We haven't forgotten, like Okwi said, our friends from the French-speaking countries. And DJ Foulon has accepted to carry out the competition management in French for our French-speaking friends. So we are going to continue with our initiative, which me, Nasser, and Okri have set up to get information to people and continue to share experience. We thank Janet and Chris, of course. They were the two first. Janet today has done a brilliant presentation on photo finish, and we have learned a lot. And we hope that this initiative that we have taken will continue with other friends. We have also, and with Nasser, we are going to organize sessions for our Arabic-speaking friends also. So we have quite a few sessions in store almost every Saturday for the next few months. We are seizing the opportunity of confinement to spread information.
Okay, so Janet, thank you again, and take care in this time, COVID time, and see you soon. I hope you will join us when we having a new presentation. with Robert and Yukio Seiki, or even with Didier Foulon in French. You will have time to learn a bit more French. So thank you, all of you, and see you very soon.
Thank you, Akri.
Thank you, and bye, everybody. Take care and remain safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Janet. Yes, sir.